seat on the same
Hi,
plane.
how are you?
Then I may go.
You doing okay? You doing well? Are you well?
Sarah's not gonna be here tonight.
Oh, she won't?
No.
Okay. Then that's all of us.
Bob Thompson's gonna be late.
Everything was really good.
Okay.
And I got to check for you also.
He's got another
Okay.
cheek and jowl and
But you were able to figure it out?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
travel time.
See, up
Good to see you again. Good to see you. Don't see much of each other
No.
these days.
Okay, I think we can call the meeting to order. Sarah informed me she is out singing tonight, and so she will not be here, or by Zoom either, because she'll be singing tonight. Her chorus group is, I think, with the Kennett folks, and they have another concert on Sunday, apparently.
Recording in progress.
So the roll call to any meeting, members, I think Kathleen, good to see you. Jerry, I don't think you get to vote tonight, unfortunately, because you are not the senior alternate. Yeah?
Aye.
David? Scott, good to see you. I don't know how some of you guys get to these meetings, you're so busy. And Jim, I guess that makes you, because Sarah's not gonna be here, she's gonna be voting tonight. Jerry, you're always welcome to comment, even if you don't get to vote.
I generally do.
I know I shouldn't have said that to just remind you, but it's okay. All right. We have a public comment on any, we got a review of the minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes,
2 sets.
work session and then the actual regular meeting. Do I hear a motion on the regular meeting of November 9? Do I have a move? Do I have a second? I have a move and a second.
2 second.
Any changes? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's done. Work session. I have a motion to approve. I have a motion to approve, a second.
Second.
All right, anybody need a moment to look at them? Good? All in favor? Aye. And by the way, I want to thank David for doing these. He always sends them to me, and they're not always in the best of shape when he sends them to me, but he gets it like 95%. It used to be 85%, but now it's like up to like 95% most of the time. And so it really helps, and between the two of us, hopefully it's readable. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Public comment on anything that's not before the board this evening. Hank, you got it? You good? No. All right. Wow. So, that having been done, our first order of business is to open a public hearing. The public hearing is an application for 2-lot subdivision submitted by the owners of the property. And property, the proposed subdivision is at 196 Dundee Road, tax map R5, lot 3. Andy, This is kind of your cue, maybe?
My cue. Thank you very much.
Any changes from what you submitted?
No, I don't believe any changes. There are a couple of
That's what I'm
small outstanding items still, so I think we will be coming in with a slightly revised final plan.
He's gonna have it there.
It is a public hearing, so yes. Welcome.
Okay. All right, is this visible enough to everybody? Everybody watching, see, okay? I'm Andy Fisher from Amanuensis Survey Company, representing Mr. Piekowitz. For a two-lot subdivision, hopefully this is a little bit more straightforward than the last time that I was here. So it is a fairly simple two-lot subdivision. The pink line around is the existing lot as it is. It's about just over 20 acres as it is. And the yellow is the proposed subdivision, so the proposed new lot, which would be 3.4 acres, leaving about 16, almost 17 acres, almost exactly 17 acres remaining with the parent lot. This doesn't have contours on it, obviously, which you folks have there so you can see. We had the wetlands delineated, which you can see a little bit here. There's just a couple of areas where the wetlands, where there are wetlands on the proposed new lot, but just very small areas. Plenty of frontage, plenty of density for lot loading. We are still waiting on state subdivision approval. We're into the state, but they're a little slow at the moment. So we are still waiting on state subdivision approval. Other than that, it's pretty.
Andy, help me out. When you're saying that you're waiting for them, what is it they need to do for you?
So since the new lot is under 5 acres, you need state subdivision approval.
Okay.
As well as the town.
All right. Thank you.
So, but we don't. The town of Jackson is more restrictive than the state, so we don't anticipate any.
If I did, I didn't.
Any issues.
Okay. Do we have a checklist?
Yes.
Any general questions first to start, or we go through the checklist and we'll ask for questions as we go? Everybody good with that?
Okay,
You're on.
thank you. You gave us copies, but the Mylar,
I did not submit the Mylar yet, only because we're still waiting on the state subdivision approval. So I'd like to have that information on the final plan. So.
Is there a critical timing process that you're looking for on this, or
do we need an emergency timing or
Yeah.
that sort of thing?
Yeah.
No, as soon as possible. I think.
As soon as possible.
Okay.
And
So-
approval could be done contingent upon the state.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm asking. I think we can do our part and have a contingent vote saying that anything that's outstanding
Sure.
works.
Sure.
I think that's okay.
yeah, so if the state says
All right.
something, I'll come back.
I gotta make
Right,
sure all
if-
these
if
guys
they're-
agree. I can say stuff, but you know.
Well, I know. Yeah, certainly, we certainly appreciate that approach, and I don't see any reason why the state would require us to change any lot lines. But, yes, if they did, then we would certainly come
The
back.
only holdup was that I didn't get the letter to you with my.
Yeah, and I was on vacation, and so there was a little bit of some
There was a
paperwork hold
folder
up.
with here.
I didn't know I was supposed to
I make a
give it back to you, you would have said it.
But we got that squared away, so.
The only reason I'm asking is on a checklist, that's all.
Okay,
So it'll be blank.
Yes,
It'll be
yeah,
blank.
Okay.
thank you.
Title box showing name of proposed subdivision and identifying title, town, and name, time, date. Right here, yes.
That's it, David.
Find it?
We're looking for the date, the plan date.
Yeah.
It should be right in the,
Thanks. Name and address of applicant and the owners of the other applicant of property and to be subdivided. I think they're on there.
Yes.
They look to be.
Wasn't many. Tax map lot number of the lot to be subdivided. That's on there. E911 address for proposed lots, if available. Do you have a
So I did not give one for the proposed lot, but the E911 address for the
Is that-
existing lot as it is there.
Pretty steep.
I think that comes afterwards.
name of zoning district where lot is to be subdivided is located.
Yep.
Okay. Minimum zoning frontage requirement, so that meets.
Yes, yep, so, there's another over here. So minimum required is 200 feet. The new lot would have 264.06 feet, and the remaining lot is 898.78 feet.
So you're really cutting it thin, huh?
Yeah, we're skin of our teeth there.
Okay. Plot scale is 1 inch equals 100 feet or better.
Yeah.
It's right in the middle of the
Okay.
block.
North arrow,
Yep. Pretty one, too.
location map clearly showing the center site location and adjacent named roads.
Lower right.
Name, license number, address, seal, and signature of surveyor.
Check.
Yes.
Oh, it's there.
This is more of a quiz for us than it is for you.
Yeah, no, no, this is good for, and I did go through the checklist again this morning for myself, just to make sure that I answered yes.
We're paying attention.
Surveyor certification statement, I certify that.
That's for the septic.
Yeah,
It's in the bottom left.
so there's this one.
Name and address and seal of engineer on all engineering sheets.
There are no engineering sheets, so that should be it.
Boundary survey, including bearing and distance of all lot lines, both current and proposed, show entire parcel being subdivided with lots numbers according to the Jackson system. Next, do see you're using the new system.
Yeah, so did I do that right? So
Yeah.
3, okay, good. I feel like I screw it up each time.
No. Existing and proposed topographical contours at 5-foot intervals are better.
I think they're 2 foot on there.
All zoning ordinance setback lines, building setback and year-round streams.
Are there any year-round streams on the property?
There aren't year-round streams, but there's year-round water. There are several ponds on,
Yep.
which are on what ends up being the remaining big
Yeah,
lot,
the primary lot.
the primary lot.
Soil map indicating soil types and soil boundaries with poor and very poorly drained hydraulic soils.
Yes, so the soils are in the sort of the green dash, and then the orange are the poorly drained wetland soils.
Square feet and acreage of lot to be subdivided in each of the proposed lots. There's one lot, you have it.
Yeah.
Check, check.
Soil minimum lot size chart demonstrating that each proposed lot meets zoning minimum lot size requirements based on section 2 of the zoning requirements.
Yes.
Yes.
Butters names, tax map, and lot numbers matching the separated butters list. They are checked in this just now. Floodplain land, if applicable. No.
There is no,
Existing buildings and other human-made objects remaining,
yes, only on the,
only other.
only on the primary lot.
All existing or proposed easements, right-of-ways, buildings, others, and other essential site features such as rock ledges, stone walls, and tree lines as applicable. All right, then.
There's not a whole lot.
Surface waters clearly identified and delineated.
How did we know if there were any deed restrictions?
Open space to be preserved.
Any deed restrictions?
The open space.
No.
We wouldn't.
Deed restrictions, if any. And all right-of-way easements and utility easements or statements indicating no knowledge of deed restrictions or easements existing.
I believe that statement is.
Existing, indicating of existing dry hydrant or fire pond within 200 feet. So,
Nothing that I know of.
let's see if you can-
And
Will there be a private road?
No, no, just a driveway.
Subdivision regulation compliance statement.
Subdivision regulations is part of the
It's part of it.
statement on the left there.
Yeah. All utility systems installation shall be shown on the final plot and installed as required.
There's nothing.
And this is considered a minor, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so we're done.
Can I ask just a question? What's the source of the water for the ponds?
That's a wonderful question. The water, the source of the water for the ponds, are they, where does the water come from for the ponds? Is it, this sort of drains from
Part
down
of
the
it comes
hillside?
from this side and part of it comes from the other side.
Yeah.
There's two different, a lot of, the way I wanted the things laid out, that the water source for the big lot is not affected by the new lot.
Yes.
It was,
That's kind of where I was getting at.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I tried to read it for the lot, really, for us to build a small house.
Yes.
And without taking away from the main lot.
did he go over?
That's it.
All right. Any questions?
Move that we accept the application.
I have a motion to accept the application. I have a second from Dick to accept the application.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I guess we mentioned earlier that that is with the one contingency that you do have the Mylar and the state approval process completed.
That's different than accepting.
You gotta just accept it.
Okay. Right, yeah, so that's what I'm getting to. Because the next step is to approve this thing, so if we approve it, we've accepted the application, now we need to vote to approve it, but I think to vote to approve it, we're going to need to do that on a contingency basis, that you'll get the Mylar to us, and you're gonna wait on that until you get the state approval,
Yes.
and so you have your own contingency with a contingency.
Yeah. Yeah, so, yes, absolutely, once we receive state subdivision approval, I'll update that on the plan and deliver revised copies in a Mylar.
Yeah, we've been there before.
Yeah, we've done that.
Okay, so we need to vote to approve.
You need a motion.
I move that we approve the application.
Okay.
It's contingent on the Mylar.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve, a second from Dick, okay. Any further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you very much.
I think we're done here.
Thank you, as always, for your time and attention. I appreciate what you'd like me to take away.
Yeah, you can have all these things, you're gonna have new stuff for us.
I will have new stuff, yeah.
You wanna
It won't-
retain something
it'll be
just for your
almost the
file,
same,
just
but-
just to have one that say this is what we worked with first time.
Thank you.
Thank you, as always, good job.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure coming here.
That was awesome.
Close it.
Yeah, I have a motion to close public hearing,
Move.
Second.
and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, public hearing is closed. Let's resume our regular meeting. All right, regular meeting, our intention was to talk about short-term rentals for an accessory dwelling unit. This is a follow-up from a comment that was made by Kevin Bennett back in, I think, our September meeting, where he questioned whether or not we prohibited or did not permit, I think is the right word for us here, a short-term rental for a property that is not a full-time residence and has an accessory dwelling unit, as to whether or not they can use the accessory dwelling unit. Scott sent me a note saying, well, we do address that in our current zoning ordinance to some degree. And that is that we do address for someone who is a permanent resident, if they have an ADU, that they're permitted to use it as a short-term rental. But we don't say the opposite as to whether or not someone, or say anything about someone who is not a permanent resident, who has an accessory dwelling unit, whether or not they can use their property as a short-term rental. So
If they're in rural, then they would be limited. If there's no.
Number of rentals.
Right. I guess one question would be, is that, you know, it's, was it 30 rentals? Is that 30 for the 2 units combined, 15 each? Or is it 30 each?
Could we word it as one STR per property?
Well, we could, and I think the material that I sent out suggests that that is being done in other municipalities.
But then we don't have to worry about resident or just land or, property owner, just one STR per property. Otherwise, we're gonna get into a bunch of mini motels, they're-
Well, and that's exactly the point, and then the article that shipped out is that if we end up not saying anything about it, it's possible, we haven't had the situation yet, and so I think I'd prefer to be proactive than to be reactive to a situation that we might have coming down the pike, basically to say that if you have more than one dwelling unit on a property, that only one dwelling unit can be used as a short-term rental.
That's what I would want.
And is that, if it's one of the dwelling units as opposed to the principal or the ADU, can they switch it, or is it?
Or do they have to identify which one?
Is it?
Well, I think they'd have to identify what was going to be the STR, because then I did some more reading, and we have site plan review. If on the RSA, I can give you the RSA, but we could get to site plan review. But I think because they make an application for a building that has all the required, egress, windows, and a proper, bedrooms and all the rest of it, I think it has to be one structure or the other.
We could make any regulation we want, basically, and then we go with it until it's challenged.
Yeah, and part of the reason I spent some time with the New Hampshire Municipal was to say they basically aren't committing to one thing or another from a legal perspective, but this has been adopted in 4 different municipalities already. And I don't think we're starting something new.
And they were okay with it.
Yeah.
And what was adopted, the one of the two?
Well, there's one that says you can't at all. It's not allowed, it's not permitted. And the others are, you can't both.
And does that apply to both rural, residential, and commercial?
At all zones.
But when they said one or the other, they meant you identify the one that will be there. That will be, like, it's the ADU, or I'm gonna do my primary dwelling,
Yeah, I
and
mean,
I'm gonna move into the ADU.
If you make an application to us for a short-term rental, it would seem that you couldn't then put a second application in for a short-term rental with the same address. Because you'd already identified one as being a short-term rental property. I suppose you could switch and make a decision at some later time.
But wouldn't you have to make an application if you were gonna switch?
And then just reapply, like we do with a
Ownership.
change of
Yeah.
ownership. You just reapply and apply for the other building.
But at one time, not both
Right.
would be able to have a short-term rental. And I think that's what Kevin Bennett was getting at.
Yeah.
And it is something we can do. And so I thought it would be a good idea for us to make the change before something comes up where someone says, no, you don't prohibit it. And it doesn't say you don't permit it.
I think the one benefit of allowing the ADU to be a short-term rental, as opposed to saying not at all for the ADU, is it would help, a young family purchase a property if they could then rent the ADU out for as much as they can get for it, given how much it costs to buy a property.
Yeah, even if they weren't a full-time resident, they was part-time.
Yeah, I mean,
As long as it's one per property.
yeah. And as I said, one of the municipalities does not permit an ADU to be used as a short-term rental at all.
And the benefit there would be a second homer. We're not getting either property for residential. If it's a second home that has an ADU in it, they occasionally use the primary residence and then short-term rent the ADU, then Jackson's not getting any residents out of that property. I think helping young families buy properties probably.
I don't, my own personal view is I don't think it would be, you could do it, but it doesn't seem to me that, as Scott said, as beneficial to say, okay, you can't use an ADU if you're it's the second homeowner. You can't use an ADU as a short-term rental. I think that's a step too far from my perspective. Could we do it? Yeah, I think we could do it and still not cause trouble for ourselves. But then the question is that the right thing to do?
But the issue, like I have an ADU, okay? And I look at the application, it doesn't distinguish, because it says an address, a lot, map and a lot line. My ADU is on my lot, and this has my same address. So we'd have to identify the application to say, is this the primary dwelling or an ADU that you're doing? Therefore, it distinguishes which one they're gonna do. But
If we held it to one, for properties that have an accessory dwelling unit, if we limited it to one STR per property, I don't think it would matter that it was one or the other.
Right, we just wouldn't receive a second application.
But I think to me that's opens up, if you
Yeah,
say
yeah,
one
yeah,
per,
yeah.
I can use which one I want, versus telling me this, which one I'm
But
gonna.
they have to, in their application, I would think, state which one.
I mean,
In
you-
their application, there's no place for them.
If
to do
we
that.
put on the application, is there an accessory unit on this property? That would answer
Correct.
the question, okay. Which unit is going to be the STR?
I think we'd have to we'd modify the application to accommodate the change
Right.
if we choose to do so. What do you guys think? I mean, this was brought up, it's an issue, it's something we don't have in our current zoning ordinance.
And would that require us to have a public hearing on it and then,
Yeah,
okay? And do we have, we have time to do
we have
that.
time to do this.
Yeah.
I think we should do that.
I mean, certainly allowing both the ADU and the private residence to be short-term rentals does us no good at all, other than just more short-term rentals in town.
I think we can get, I mean, it's really like one sentence. So,
I think luckily, it's so straightforward that we can really get behind this one. You know, it doesn't get squirrely on us.
Right.
It's pretty, you know,
well,
cut and dry.
it could, if you really felt strongly, we ought to.
There'll be debate, but that's fine, but it's very finite what this debate is about.
I think this is a reasonable proposal. I think it fits with the intent that we have of trying to make accessory dwelling units part of our property offering without putting too much restriction on it, but also avoiding the situation where we have mini hotels.
Right. I mean, the purpose for the state putting the accessory dwelling unit in the law, and thereby we could adopt it, was to make more housing available. And if we were to say that they could have both as STRs, it sort of flies in the face of what that.
Right, that doesn't help us on housing.
No, to me, this seems to be something
I
that,
think this proposal is right on.
yeah, that we just didn't address the first time through.
We always tweak our ordinances.
I show.
Do you want to bring that to town council?
I would want to do that if we vote to agree to do this. What I think I would need is for us to vote for me to get to town council to hone the language
Yeah.
for the concept.
Couldn't the municipal association do that for us?
They won't do that.
No,
I asked them if they would, and they wouldn't.
they don't do zoning.
They won't do it.
Just comment on it.
And they commented very circumspectly.
Yeah, they won't give a legal opinion, though they are lawyers.
But that's not anything different than we do with any warrant article or any change to our zoning ordinance
I was
as to
just
have
trying to save
council
money.
review.
They always put it back to you,
Yeah.
the town,
Right.
and your town council,
Yeah,
because
here's your options.
that's who's
Yeah.
gonna defend it.
Yeah,
I mean,
you gotta own it.
bring it to him.
All right, any,
But we really don't, I mean, I agree with, we should do this, but we don't really know if this exists today.
if this what?
This could exist today. People could have both, because we've never questioned it. On any of these applications, we've never questioned.
We do know, well, we do know how many ADUs there are in town, and we've had only one property so far that's applied that has an ADU on it.
And they would have to declare how many beds, and
That's true.
show the ads. And I think we would notice if they were, I mean, you're right, we don't have anything right now that says that someone with an ADU can't rent that in
Right.
addition to their primary residence.
Well, if you're gonna spend the money with the town council, then
Yeah, but it's never come up as to whether they could
let them
get,
define
you
it.
know, 60 rentals if they were doing both, or, you know, whether the 30 applied to the two combined, or anything like that. I don't think one has come up. And I think that we would notice, it's not, you know, specifically declared, but I think through the materials that they would have to provide, we would recognize that there was more than one.
Want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'd make a motion that Bill bring the words out that you feel are appropriate and bring it to town council.
I have a motion from Dick and a second from Kevin. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous? Thank you.
And then we'll set up potentially a public.
Yeah, we'll need to have a public hearing
Hopefully, January.
process in
You have to have the
January.
wording first, and then
Yeah.
we'll have the hearing.
So that's,
But
But we
again,
can, our first meeting in January is fairly early, isn't it? So we can, it just means we have to have a second meeting in January.
Okay.
And we can approve the language in the early meeting before the public hearing, and then go to public hearing.
yeah, our first meeting is the 11th.
Pardon?
The 11th.
Yeah, okay. That works?
Yeah.
And I appreciate Kevin bringing it to our attention. I know he has a similar concern in his own backyard, and he's on the planning board there, so,
as do all of us, really.
yeah. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, the way, fortunately and unfortunately, the way our zoning ordinance is written is that if it doesn't say you can, you can't. And it doesn't say you can, it doesn't say you can't. And somebody's gonna find a loophole that they're gonna jump through, and it's like, well, you said you could do this and you could do that, and I'd rather it be something that,
This is aspirational, but some time back, we had asked North Country Council to sort of review our zoning ordinances and clean them up. And it sort of got hijacked a little bit, and it never really happened. And again, it's aspirational, but at some point in our future, we should consider having another look at cleaning up our zoning ordinances.
yeah, we got that partially done.
Yeah.
We spent
Well,
some,
we didn't really.
but it didn't happen
Right.
completely.
Yeah, it sort of got hijacked.
Yeah, it got sidelined.
Again, I said it was aspirational.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, speaking about applications, we have one, it's almost like they're doing this extremely early. They don't plan to do, it sounds like the follow-up letter we asked. First of all, it's up on, this is the one that is up on Whitney Hill Loop. This couple is remodeled this home in preparation for them to move here permanently in 5 years, when they retire, but they want to recoup some of the money that they spent on rehabbing the place between now and 5 years. They want to rent it out, okay? So they didn't offer an advertisement because they were going to do it word of mouth. They wanted to do more local. So we asked them for a letter saying that, and they can confirm that that's what they're going to do and how they're going to add. They came back with a letter saying, well, we are going to use a service, but we're not going to be ready until the summer. So,
And do they have a room and meals tax? then?
yes, they do.
Okay, they got
Yeah,
that.
apparently they've been doing this by word of mouth before.
Hmm.
So this is not, it's almost like an existing one. This isn't a new one. They've been doing it by word of mouth, not having anybody do it. And they've been limiting the number of rentals to only 15 days a year, because that keeps them under the IRS requirement to report that income. They are now going to increase that, so they have to go through the hoops. But they've always had a meals and room tax, and they've paid that. But they've not had much usage. So we are approving an application that probably won't get any activity, and we will not get an advertisement until sometime in the spring when they're ready to go and start in the summer. So there's no advertisement for this program.
And even if we don't get an advertisement, if we were to see an advertisement that advertised more beds than, or more, more people than the beds support that are on the tax card or the septic approval, we could act on that.
Correct, and they have said in this letter, they wrote us that they will send us the advertisements once it's been approved and ready to go. They will send us one, so we'll put it in the application. So everything else meets the requirements. They have a meal and room tax. They find out the application. So
Even though they're looking to do this in the future, they'd like to complete the application at this time.
Well, but it also sounds like it's not future, because even though it's the word of mouth, they've been doing it, it's just been at a limited basis.
They want to hook up with a service, apparently.
Yeah.
And actually, this is a question to you, Bill, or Bob, sorry.
I answered anything.
Are we gonna sunset this at some point?
Sunset.
In other words, this is an application
Right.
that's an existing short-term rental, and they really should have applied in some fashion
Well, that was what
a
I
few
was
years ago.
looking at when, I'm looking at the application and I read the letter as this came up, and it's like, yeah, clearly, just because you're not going to an existing short-term rental site doesn't mean you don't have to have it registered with the town.
And they recognize that with the room and meals tax.
Yeah, right, but they didn't recognize the application.
Right.
So that's always step one, is to get them in, and, I mean, they applied on November 17th, so that's kind of a moot point.
Right, I just mean that we put this into law several years ago, and we're now seeing people come in that really should have applied
Several years
ago. At this point, no one should be able to submit, well, take that back, because they could still, yeah, I guess you could still apply going forward. I mean, I guess we could fine them for what they've been doing, in between.
Going back, circling back to this one particularly, is there any reason for us not to?
I don't think there's any reason for us not to accept the application, if that's what you're asking, if all the rest of it's in order. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that their statement about their financial needs really should be a whiteout, because that should have nothing to do with our decisions.
Yeah.
Financial
Yeah, we don't, yeah.
issues are not an influence on us.
Right.
If we need it to pay our mortgage,
Yeah.
that's not,
That's all very nice and good,
Yeah.
but yeah.
good luck now.
Yeah, some of the short-term rental ordinances have exceptions for individuals who only rent 14 days or less. And that's not what we have. We don't have that exception. And it's like, well, we don't have it, so it's like, we can't say, yeah, that was very nice, and you don't do it more than 14 days, so, we won't look your way. Of course, it makes you wonder if we should, but, but we don't, so.
Is there a fine levied against someone who has been acting as a short-term rental agent?
Well, that's just it. We aren't in the enforcement business. The Board of Select Board is in the enforcement business, and
Maybe
so.
it's a question
Right.
for the select person.
And I think what I was trying to get at is that this one doesn't matter because they're going to rent it less than what we allow, even in rural residential.
No, they're probably gonna go to that's the issue, they're going up.
Okay,
To-
but they can go up to what we allow,
Correct.
but we've had short-term rentals come in that were ongoing, that we grandfathered
Right.
in rural residential, far beyond the point where we put this into law. I guess that's what I'm talking about, is
How does that talk, you mean, when you said sunset?
is that we should not be allowing, full-term, short-term rentals within rural residential at this point, even if they were doing it beforehand.
Right.
I just think that we've gone far enough past the point we put it in law, that we should not be grandfathering those. I don't know if we get those coming in
That's a good
now.
point.
So if
is this
someone
a
does it anyway,
Grandfather type
then-
issue with
Well, I
the
guess
road, or you-
if we were still willing to grandfather and they showed us that they were doing, 100 rentals a
Yeah,
year.
it's called non-conforming, I agree.
Right, then we would,
So then the
we
question-
said we would grandfather those operations that were already existing.
So then the question would be whether or not the select board would be fining them for not putting in an application for the 3 years.
Well, and there's that too, as well, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, even if they were doing limited short-term rentals, if they don't have an application at this point, they're operating against our law.
Correct. Is there,
Well, the way it's worded, they rent it out like 2 weeks a year.
Right.
Or a week at a time.
Right, I'm just saying that technically they could be fined because they haven't applied even for that limited short-term rental. Based on our grandfathering, if they were doing it 100 times a year, if we were still grandfathering, they could get an application to continue doing it 100 times a year. And I think at least that should be
So
stopped
we would
at
have,
this point.
and it
Right.
could be, and so it'd be in the enforcement business, yeah, not so heavily into the investigative business.
Right, and we never expected that would be the
Right,
case.
But then the question would be for this
We've done a
application.
fairly good job of investigating.
You can, yeah, but I
I get why you're doing it.
curiosity to either.
I'm just saying, if someone comes to us now and says, I'd like to I'd like to apply to short-term rent, I've been doing it for the past 10 years and doing it, full-time, and you have this grandfather part of your law, so I'd like to, and we should say, no, you should have come to us 3 years ago.
They brought it
You're
to
now
our
limited
attention.
to
We
the
didn't
30
go
rentals a
looking
year.
for it.
Yeah,
but is there any documentation of when the cutoff period was?
No, we've never set a cutoff, that's not so.
So if I
And that
was
was,
doing,
that was, I think,
I'm not sure that we need to, though.
yeah.
I thought
We
we
put
had
it into
a
law
1 or
certain
2
day.
year,
We said we had a
Moratorium.
year.
Hmm?
I thought we had
Oh,
a,
maybe we had.
we did, we said a year that they had to do it.
Yes.
Yeah,
Because we didn't want everybody to come in all at once and inundate the office with all this stuff. And we didn't want to have to hire somebody to work it. All right, so let's deal with what we have on the table. Are we going to accept the application? I have a motion to accept the application.
I move.
I have a motion to accept second.
but as far as comments, are we gonna comment to the select board?
I think we need to comment to the select board that this wouldn't qualify for a grandfathering.
Right.
It'll be limited to the 30 rentals per year.
You would be limited to the 30 rentals.
Okay.
And again, the term's non-conforming. Not grandfathered.
Well, this one apparently hasn't been non-conforming.
Yeah.
Yes,
I don't think-
whatever that language is.
I don't think there needs to be any notation like that, just
But we just
approve it.
we don't want them to think that they, you know, can get away with being non-conforming in the future because they've been doing this in the past.
This is an exercise in semantics.
Well, this came up a couple months ago when somebody, that they were older. They had been doing it for a while, and we didn't say that. We didn't put a limit on that. So,
We have a motion on the floor.
I'm just, want to
Well,
know
I'm
the
just saying,
notation that I
moving
do this
forward,
like-
we ought to make sure that at this point, we only allow the 30 rentals in rural residential.
All right, I have a motion and a second to accept the application with comment.
Who's second?
Jim, Scott, Jim? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any holding on? Thank you. Oh, goodness. All right, capital improvement program. We had a really short work session a couple weeks back. And my takeaway from that was that the select board wanted us to focus on those things that might come before the budget hearings that you're going to have in January, things that might be on warrant articles for this voting cycle. And that we should be identifying whether those items have appropriate priority and whether or not the funding that's been identified is the funding level that fits within our understanding of what ought to go forward in a capital improvement plan. I think, as I've said numerous times, it's really hard to try to close out something when you're in the middle of a process. But we're being asked to do that to some degree here. And did I hear that wrong, Bob? Or
The discussion at the meeting that I remember was that you stated you weren't gonna have the capital improvement plan completed. And so we said, okay, it's not complete, it's not complete. The things that were before us to deal with this year at the annual meeting weren't gonna be put on hold because the capital improvement plan was not
right,
complete.
nor should they.
And that's what I remember.
Yeah.
Unless there was something else that I didn't catch about a partial capital improvement plan coming for things you presumed might need to be addressed right now. I don't remember that.
That's what Bob described is how I remember it.
Okay, so then let me ask, what do we need to do as a planning board to help make recommendations to the select board? I mean, that's the purpose of the capital improvement program. If there's things that are facing us that are going to be in the next 3 months, is there anything that we can do to help that?
We could go to the budget hearings and make comments.
And do we need to do that as part of the planning board, I guess is my question. We need to do that as part of the capital improvement plan. Is it something that we should be doing officially at this point? Or I think I've talked to several of you one way or another, where it's like, no, we should just back away from those things because they're going to be part of the budget hearing process and they're already beyond the scope of what we're doing.
I think that notwithstanding, it might be I mean, I know you're going to go to the budget hearing, and I would certainly feel comfortable authorizing you to speak both as an individual and as a chairman of the board.
I wasn't at the last meeting, and I don't know if this is pertinent to this discussion, but I know that we have a couple, school and library being a couple of the bigger ones where we assume that there's going to be some significant need, but we don't know what that need
With
is.
respect to the school has, as I understand it, just commissioned a study group, I believe it's Siemens, to look at the whole school process, including what structural improvements, if necessary, would be necessary.
Right, but the point I was going to make though is that if we have these holes where we have not gotten a figure from the school, we have not gotten a figure from the library, I don't really see the point of putting a figure in because it's not going to get put into this year's budget if we don't have figures at this point in time.
Right.
And I mean, I think you put, TBD in things like that because it's going to matter to the next, and then maybe the capital improvements plan is something we ought to address in some form on almost an annual basis, just not to rewrite it, but to amend it where we had items that didn't have any knowable figures, but a year from now we might know what the school needs.
Make it a living document, so to
Right.
speak.
But I guess I don't see the point of making up numbers to put in it if those numbers are not pertinent to the next budget cycle.
One of the things that got discussed, and this might be a good time to mention it, got discussed at the select board's meeting the other night, was a thing called SWET, which is the state, let's see how to put it together, it's statewide education tax, which is, right now it's about 360-some thousand a year. And the idea of it is that it sets a figure of what is the state, Springwood has challenged the state to say what an adequate education costs. And while no money at this time changes hands, it's still a bookkeeping entry of 363 million. And there's a case that just recently occurred, Conval versus the state. It said the figure that they were using was inadequate. And it was a 98-page decision that the court agreed with Conval. Now, the Attorney General has indicated that he's probably going to appeal this, and
This is a tax being
yeah,
collected from the
there's three
municipalities.
towns that would be adversely, if you look at having to put the actual money into, that would actually change hands, and that's Jackson, Molten Borough, and Rye. Part of the issue is that the legislature has they've always punted on this. And it's still pending whether or not the Attorney General is going to appeal it. But it could happen. It could happen that a town like Jackson and Marlboro or Rye could be hit. The question is whether 6,000 or 7,000 or 8,000 a year, or in the case of Jackson, we're almost close to 10, what an adequate education is. And the court, in a 98-page decision, said it is inadequate. It could happen that Jackson's going to have to kick in $500,000 a year to it.
And is this assessed not by the number of children in the town, but
Has
by
nothing to
tax
do- has
basis?
nothing to do with
Do
that.
their tax base.
What it's doing is taking a fund
Right, so we'll same
and
thing with.
distributing it to
with
towns so
right?
that each town gives its children what the state calls an adequate education. And it's referred to as a SWEP tax. As it stands right now, it's just a bookkeeping entry. In other words, the town gets a bill for 300 something, but as it was explained, there's no money actually changes hand. But that could change. And that 500,000 would throw a big monkey wrench into any capital improvement plan. And I think it's something that should be at least put in the back of their mind. Did I explain that fairly?
As I understood what Jerry said at the meeting, that aligns with what you just said. The thing that I wasn't clear on is money doesn't actually go to the state.
That's correct.
And that's another, and you just repeated that. But what I wasn't clear on is the money collected?
No.
Okay.
No, it's a bookkeeping entry only, as it exists now. The Conval decision could change all that.
Right, and so.
And so we're hoping, as McAleer suggested to you, that he suggested the legislature, as usual, isn't going to do much, haven't in the history, and he doesn't foresee it happening. But if the Attorney General appeals the case,
Right.
and it goes to the Supreme Court,
Yeah.
then it probably would be defeated. It would,
Yeah.
They would reverse the lower court. That's what everybody's hoping. And then it would continue to just be a bookkeeping entry.
And the piece I didn't understand is if we're not collecting it, why is it on our list of taxes for property owners?
Because the state requires it.
And so it doesn't factor into the tax bill?
It
Because
does not.
the whole conversation started, as I can see it, because people's tax bills went up.
Right.
So if they didn't go up from that, what made them go up? Because the town taxes only went up 3%, so it must have been if they were in the water district, because I heard those taxes went
Yes.
way up, and then just the regular local school
Like for
tax went up by 15%, so maybe that's what accounted for the property taxes
if you
going up
look
in
at
town.
Conway, for example, in their reevaluation, the commercial went down, the residential went up.
Right,
Total collected didn't change, but how it got applied did.
right, and so that must have been why our taxes went up then, is primarily the school tax.
My only reason in mentioning it is because there was a discussion at the select board's meeting, and it all could be not an issue.
Yeah, but it also could be.
Well, it could be. It could be devastating.
Yeah.
So only 3 towns in the state.
Yeah.
Everybody else would get money back, but because Rye, Moultonborough, and Jackson are high property towns,
This whole conversation in Connecticut created a major issue.
yeah. And I mean, the
Revenue sharing.
The real reason it exists is because we don't have a statewide tax
Right.
income or.
Right, so there has to be some mechanism for the dollars to be formed and to move. Yeah.
They didn't include Newcastle this time?
No, so, you mean,
Because that was one of our partners the last time.
oh, you mean in the lawsuit?
Yeah.
Yeah, this time it was Conval.
Yeah, I'm just hoping, you mentioned around the school board looking at, assessing the building, and I know they've done some work on that before.
It's called, but the school is called equalized evaluation. It's part of the formula for what we pay tuition, what each.
Yes, yeah,
Per student,
yeah.
I think it's 65-45
Yeah,
or 65-35.
I hope it's, yeah.
Um,
I can see it, 110%, yeah.
I tried to correct it. 65-35, that between equalized evaluation and tuition.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out the article that, from the Conway Daily Sun on Conway, where they've had an issue where they hope to close a school and save $1 million a year. And the way to fix it is to build an $80 million school.
You know, so which diving board do you want to jump over? But if you notice, the board voted to do nothing, so.
Third grade math didn't work.
How long term is
And-
this?
and the only reason I mentioned it is because it's sort of like something hanging over our heads if it does happen.
All right, so here, then let me get back to this. Then, do we need to do any voting on this evening for anything relative to the CIP? I guess that's my question. Do we need to do that, or do we need to, as a good for example, we have the salt pile, the shed roof that's one of the items on here.
David, did you, the number you put in for that, I think that number is.
Yes, 250.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that something
247.
that we should say, yeah, that's something that the select board should be dealing with, or should we, or do we just have it here and by the time February comes around or March, it's either in or out, or
Is that rhetorical or not?
I mean, I thought we agreed at the last meeting that there were three items that we were gonna present to the select board.
well, that's what I thought. So
That-
that's
Because you
what
can
I'm
have budgeted items on your capital improvement program. These are not wish lists. You can have a budgeted item on there. So if you guys choose to put it in the budget, we can still have it on here. And I thought the three we agreed on was the roof on the storage, the culvert repair that came up at the last minute, I think at your last meeting.
That may get changed, I think, or
That big-
is that correct to think about, instead of doing the culvert, maybe doing a bridge over it? Just a Black Mountain Road.
Is that,
No.
I was listening to you,
I
I'm
listened-
sorry, I was.
No, at the last meeting, it was right after your select board meeting, and Gary presented this potentially larger culvert issue that he wanted to be
Yeah.
fixed. He gave a price of about $200,000
Yeah.
to do that
That was
project.
from Burry.
So, at that meeting, after your meeting, we said, okay, let's put that on the capital improvement, and that's a priority, because Gary really has identified it as a life safety issue for the role. And then the third one was good, bad, and I know this is all up in the air, and I know it's been hashed out today, but the third one was the fire station, that you guys were gonna put something in the budget, somehow, some way, somewhere, you were gonna do that. Those are the three things that we were comfortable saying that we would recommend to them to put it on. And
As a
we did
priority, they're the priority.
that we can identify now, because we have numbers.
Talking about the culvert, going back to that on Black Mountain Road, that the road agent, Gary, also presented a culvert improvement plan.
Correct.
Where he identified in
Yes.
the town.
We didn't identify that as high. We had talked about it a couple meetings ago that it was being high. But basically, there is already money in the budget to do that.
Right.
There's $95,000 right now that's put into the thing. We had suggested, and this is another thing we could suggest, is that suggested raising that from 95 to 105, to 150,000 moving forward. So we'd have more money to fix those with a plan over the next 5 years to fix these other identified culverts that he was referring to.
But
So you don't have a capital improvement plan, and you didn't have one last year.
Right.
Is that how you operated last year, that you made recommendations to the board?
No, we weren't in the business.
Why don't,
Because I wasn't. the
No, we didn't make any
select-
recommendations
What-
on your budget.
So,
what if we did it from the standpoint of not so much looking at the numbers, because we really don't know what the numbers are, but if we just made recommendations that, you know, like for example, the roof on the sand shed, we recommend that the roof be put on the sand shed. If we chose the improvement on Black Mountain Road, that culvert, that would either be a culvert or a bridge that we were talking about the other day, that we would cite that. That we, with respect to the fire station, we would cite that. Because we really don't know what the numbers are yet. In other words, it would be more general in the recommendation.
Yeah.
So it's not a true capital improvement plan, I understand that.
But these are all sort of things already in process to some degree.
Right.
That need to be addressed.
So I would argue that we also put the housing component,
And the housing was something else.
because that's something that it's, all this other stuff, we're sort of interpreting what other departments are looking for. We're making our best guess as to, you know, where it ought to go and how it should go, but the housing is really from us, and there's no other town entity that's looking for that, to the planning board, and so,
That meeting that you went to, Scott, did they have any idea?
which,
The one I
There's so many.
was last
All
month.
12 of them now.
Was last month?
we real quickly, the things that are kind of going on right now, you have the Black Mountain Ski revitalization project, and, you know, obviously housing staff is a critical issue for Black, and housing is part of that problem. And if you turn it around, if Black were able to offer housing in some fashion, that would make, you know, that would give them a great edge on hiring people, because just being able to live in Jackson,
Right.
you know, would be a benefit to working at Black. So Black is Andrew Shepard. I don't know if you guys have heard of him, but he's former CEO of Saddleback. He's brought 3 or 4 different ski areas in Maine back from either closed or nearly closed. He is working on getting Black, basically identifying a sustainable future for Black. So he is trying to see what he might be able to work on for housing. I've been pursuing the Forest Service, because in Colorado there's a project going on with the Forest Service is allowing housing to be built on their land. And it's, the Forest Service here in New Hampshire is interested in it. There's some restrictions to how it can be done, but we're kind of seeing what opportunities might be there. That was the most recent meeting. Ann Peterson is looking to kind of divest of her properties, part of which might go to the Forest Service. The land that would go to the Forest Service probably is not developable, but the Forest Service does do land swaps or exchanges sometimes, so that might be something. Finding a way to continue it in is, you know, has put together is sort of another avenue, because she has been given advice by an attorney that she cannot ensure that the property will continue as it is under some other owner. Sort of pursuing what options might be there. So there's a lot of different things going on, but having a housing commission in town, I think, would give a lot of credibility to any effort. And, you know, there's some more creative things that might be done too. We talked about ADUs and, you know, preferring that ADUs be used for housing as opposed to short-term rental. You know, perhaps Jackson could support the construction of an ADU in some fashion if it was devoted to full-time residency instead of short-term rental. It'd be great if Jackson could offer tax credits, you know, for that sort of thing. The state doesn't allow that at the moment. Yeah.
Is that commission able to accept grants or donations?
Right. But it would then work hand in hand with a nonprofit so that it doesn't have to do the work. You know, I think we would want to have a nonprofit that would be managing the properties, you know, basically doing all the legwork.
And that's so important.
Did I answer your question? You asked about a meeting.
Yeah, but the follow-up on that is that part of the reason that we actually got asked to do a CIP was because of the facilities committee and trying to identify priorities in town. And you know, you're the guy who compiled all that information, and affordable housing and housing was the #1 issue. And if we don't address the #1 issue, that a good number of people, you had amazing
Over 300.
response. If we don't address that, then we're missing the point. As especially as a planning board, we're missing the point of why we exist.
We recognize though that it's a problem that areas like Jackson or Aspen or all have the exact same problem.
Yeah,
If not the entire coast and the coast, but tourist towns have that problem.
Rural first towns.
yeah, and a lot of tourist towns are taking action similar to what we're describing here in order to do something.
I mean, what's happened post-pandemic is almost like a gentrification of the area where they've just driven up the price of the houses. So-
Well, and even if you have the land, just construction alone is problematic.
Yeah.
I mean, if we took all the reasons why you shouldn't do things, we should all just go home.
Andy,
Because we shouldn't do anything.
No,
There's
I
at least 3,000 reasons why you shouldn't do stuff.
I think what Scott's doing is important.
So that would be another item to vote on.
yeah, I mean, I think that if we want a housing commission, we want to put any money into the housing commission, you know, it's really a planning board effort, and so that's one thing we ought to formally propose.
Because we had discussed about at the last meeting, that this would be a living document.
Right, and this is, I mean, I suppose that the housing commission is not really a, you know, a capital improvements plan issue. That's something we can just create a warrant to create a housing commission. The CIP plan part would be any money that we want to put into it. And I think we sort of penciled in 50,000, which is, doesn't really go very far, you know, towards purchasing property or even, you know, subsidizing ADU construction if we want to get into that. It's more-
Was Habitat for Humanity represented there?
We've spoken with them in the past. They have expressed interest in projects in Jackson,
Yeah.
partly because half the board coming, you know, lives in Jackson, I think, or at least it used to be.
When they had asked me to go on the board, that was one of the things, I said, what would it take you to get involved in Jackson? What would Jackson have to do? And they had all sorts of reasons they didn't want to, but I said, if we came up with
The
some
land,
kind of funding,
yeah, or the land, if we said,
Or-
here's, you know, 4 acres.
they had some prerequisites, but they were open to listening.
Yeah, I think they would love again, just because so many of them, you know, live in Jackson or close to Jackson. I think they'd love a project in Jackson. But you know, if we came up with the land, they could then, you know, help with the construction part of it.
But the planning board is certainly, that's.
I mean, the one thing I don't know about,
We
one
should
thing,
be involved in.
one thing I don't know about Habitat for Humanity is if we were looking to develop a property for rental units, do they get involved in something like that, or is it only for sale?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that they do is that they interview a lot of applicants for a home, and they have a committee that actually chooses which person will.
They're really into home ownership.
Yeah, that's why I asked whether
Yeah.
they would be interested in a rental property development. But actually, Ann Peterson allowed, you know, she lets her tenants vote
Yeah.
on a new tenant.
All right, so where are we? We going to do any voting, or are we going to do any recommending, or are we going to choose to punt and kick the can down the road? I think that there are a bunch of things here that either in progress already that we've identified. I don't think we really have to deal with those. I mean, if there's something that says we're already, you know, reserving for a forestry truck, and that's something that has been happening for 20 years, well, I don't think we need to mess with those things again. If it's a new item, maybe that would be something we can talk about. But it seems to me especially we're looking at some of these things are replacements of existing facility that we have. To get back to the idea of facilities. That unless somebody has a real concern about how we're funding some of these things, or that we should be funding some of these things, I think it's makes sense to just kind of say, yep, they're on the board, and let them go. If somebody says, for example, $1 million for a fire truck, that should only be $750,000, maybe we have a conversation. But none of us would be able to have the conversation because none of us know what the difference is between 750,000 and $1 million.
Right.
But we could have the conversation.
Yeah.
But my sense is because we don't know enough, or if someone wants to pick at something, we can do that as we go along. But I would let those go. The ones that I think that David has talked about as considering them to be priority, we can argue about the priority is whether or not it's a priority or not, but I think we've already made some decision around that those are priorities. I like your idea, Jerry, about not dealing with funding, because it seems that we would have some decision-making process that would attach to that. Fire station's a great example. If you said, well, it's only 2.2 million, well, you made a decision one way or the other about how we should be proceeding on that. As opposed to saying, yes, we agree that the fire station needs to be addressed as a priority one way or the other. And I'm okay if we want to vote and put a dollar amount on stuff, that's fine. If we choose to say these are priorities and establish those as the priorities that should be before the select board this go around, I'm okay with that too. It's up to you guys.
That would be my recommendation.
This is a board decision. It's not my decision.
Right,
Okay.
it's the board.
Well, in my opinion, I think that the select board would welcome any and all input that you have. If you want to bring that input forward as a board or come individually or whatever you want to do, I mean, it's always nice to hear from folks. But I would say that if you're gonna, have recommendations on things like salt sheds, fire station upgrades, what would be really helpful for me is to hear how you intend for that to be funded. Because sometimes are you gonna take a $2.2 million fire station and recommend that we start a capital reserve fund for 20 years in order to pay for it? Or are you gonna recommend a bond, and how would you recommend paying for the salt shed? And those are things that are gonna be just as helpful. Because we know what those high priority items are anyway. I mean, that's already been shared with us in public meetings, so that's not news that we understand their high priority items and are high priority items because you probably, as a board, think they're all important. I get, so it's the funding mechanism that would be most helpful to hear from, in my opinion.
The committee that Barbara and you all discussed, has that been put on the back burner now because of Jay's approach to it? Anything?
No, that was an ad hoc committee to look at site development for the new construction project just south of the library. And initially,
do you still want to do that?
We do. But as Julie pointed out, time is short. How much work? I mean, we've got drawings of retaining walls. Who's going to come in? How is it going to be paid for? Are we going to get Tyler Drew to come on his dime and give us a real, detailed drawing and sketch on how that would look and, you know, how's it gonna be paid for, does he have time to pull away? And, I mean, these things don't happen in an afternoon on their end either, so there's that as well. And bringing new people in that aren't really
Up to speed.
up to speed and, yeah, in the know, I guess, to a certain degree. That takes a lot to.
That was what I was gonna say,
is
I don't see that being so helpful at this point. Yeah, and
Yeah.
looking at the time frames.
Yeah. That would have been, well, the meeting's adjourned, so it's, next time do that,
Yeah.
you know, provide input.
Okay, I just wonder what your thoughts on that were.
Yeah, it was an ad hoc committee that was gonna look at site development on one particular site.
Right.
As you know, we've got 3 new construction sites and 2 different ways to fund a renovation that we're looking at, but so it would be great to hear what you guys have to say. You're as much in the know as anybody in town of the need and also as educated and up to speed on the ways to fund these issues.
Yeah, well, here's my concern. I know we have a bunch of different feelings about all of these things. And so, my concern is that we have appropriate respect for everybody who's involved in the process. And my concern is that if we make one comment, it'll be perceived as you know, trying to skew the result of people's thinking in a way that makes other folks feel like we are not listening. And we all live in this town. We're all neighbors. We all care about Jackson. And I don't want to be in a position where this body starts dividing us. We should be in the process of supporting each and every one of us in a way that's as positive as we can. Now, that doesn't mean we aren't going to make some hard decisions about funding some things. Can we afford to build a new school and a new firehouse at the same time? Probably not. I don't know if both of those things are on the plate or not on the plate. But if they were, everyone would agree that we wouldn't want to do both of those at the same time and try to toss it into any kind of bond fund to do it. And I'm using that as an exaggeration, hyperbole. Hyperbole is wonderful for doing things like that. If you,
That's an appropriate statement, I mean, it
it is.
reality.
It's a reality. So it's like, okay, where do you start? Where do we begin? How do we do this in a way that is meaningful, is useful for you as a select board, and also gets at our charge. To your point, we're supposed to be making recommendations, and we're supposed to be doing it the best we can. I don't think we've done enough work to do it, to be honest. I don't think we have.
Well, I don't know if you're supposed to be doing that or not, but you certainly can and you always could. And so you could decide that you want to handle it the same way you handled it last year, or you can decide you're going to handle it.
This is not something we do every year.
It
This
doesn't
is
matter.
something that hasn't been done really
Yeah.
10 years.
since 2009 was the last time I think anybody looked at this. So it's like it's 15 years out almost. And we're coming in and we're saying, well, the process that was used 14 years ago was pretty damn good. The guys did the work. They did a really good job, I think. But now we have new things that are on the plate, and the new things need to be addressed. And I'll be the first to admit, I don't know what the hell I'm doing entirely. I can only work as well as I can with everybody who's here. We make a good effort at it. And we try to make a proper recommendation. So, for example, if doing a housing commission is a smart idea, putting the shed roof on salt storage makes sense. Should we be recommending that? I think so.
Yep.
And I think that those are kinds of things that we should be putting up front. Your idea on the solar, I think it should be put up front simply because it pays for itself. It's like, duh. And so we're making an investment, not spending money. Those are my personal feelings. It's not necessarily that of this planning board. But I think those are things that we need to do.
And I think you sort of homogenized that feeling from all of us.
Yes.
I mean, that seems to be a fair homogenation of it. That would be, if I had to write it, that would be very close to what the recommendation I would have the chairman of the board make.
Yeah.
Two things. One, the most important thing, I have a grant due tomorrow. Hopefully it'll be in by noon. And that's why I got here late, and that's why I need to leave at 8:30. And second, you guys can do whatever you want. But I would, if you're gonna make specific recommendations on things you wanna see as warrant articles this year, it would be most helpful if you could also pass along your views on how they're gonna be paid for.
Which comes down to sort of priority and timing. If we need something next year, then we're paying for it through this budget cycle.
Yeah.
If we need
Yeah.
it. We know we need it, but we think we don't need it until 5 years from now, then we can start putting money towards it for 5 years.
And just because your capital improvement plan is not complete, doesn't mean you can't make your ideas clear to the board for what could conceivably be on this year's warrant article, and it also doesn't mean that you have to.
All right, so we have, I think, one more meeting before your public hearings for budget. It's on the 11th, is that correct?
Our meeting is on the 11th.
And are you going to check with the attorney for the STR adjustment? that we're
Well,
gonna make?
you authorized me to do that, right? You authorized me to do that.
Yes.
So I'll do that.
We did that, too.
And I think we should have a public hearing that also talks about what we have, or we might recommend on the CIP as well. And in the interest of trying to make sure that that cap on that head is appropriately placed and we meet your time requirements.
And I apologize.
No,
No, don't apologize.
no, we're already 2 minutes late.
Pesky little Dave Walls.
We're already 2 minutes late. If that's where we're at, and those are the things that we think are important, we have some work to do. But let's do that. I think, I think what you've heard, what we think is important. If everyone agrees, if those are the things that we care about most, this budget cycle, you already know what those are. And they concur, except for maybe the Housing Commission, what isn't on your radar, it's on ours. But we're putting it on your radar, and either you need to put it out there, or we need to put it out there, which we need to decide which that's going to be. And we can do that. Choose what you want us to do. If you want us to take the lead on that, we can take the lead on that. But to be honest, I would prefer it comes from the select board, because the reason you had us do this is because you wanted that first priority to be looked at.
And communication goes to Julie and ends up on the agenda.
Okay, so we'll work through on that. And be prepared to vote next time on what we think we should do for funding?
Thanks.
Because I don't think we're gonna figure it out in 5 minutes,
No problem, I needed a break.
right?
But I think part of the difficulty is that we're trying to speak for a variety of departments, and we really haven't gotten a lot of information from most of those
Yeah.
departments.
Well, we've got a lot of information from the highway department.
From the highway
He's
department.
given us,
Right.
For the ones
One
who do.
part.
but that's the biggest
It's not a.
cost right now we're talking about, is the highway department.
Right, but, you know, the
Thanks,
school is
Bob.
important, the library is
Yeah.
important, and all of that. I'm just saying that,
But at our last meeting, we discussed, that's not even gonna be an agenda for this year, for 2026.
I understand, it's just,
Not even-
it's just that we're not.
We're not even
getting-
discussing this.
I know, I know.
Should
Yeah.
be probably.
That needs to
But
be
in
done.
any case, I just think we,
Anyone have any further that we want to do this evening?
Dick has his head on, I think we need to leave.
Hearing no
I
further,
think,
I'd like to make a suggestion,
yeah.
go home.
yeah.
Okay, I have a motion to end this thing. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm not voting.
Thanks, everybody.
Come on, man.